So let's go straight at the economic effects. We just heard a report that Mexico, we know, is struggling and slipped into recession. How much of the difficulty Mexico is having is because of the problems along the border?
Yeah, so I think exactly that's exactly the point. The humanitarian crisis is something that we hear about on a daily basis. But people are not really talking about the looming business crisis that's underlining that. And I think that business crisis is partially driven by the conversations around the threats of a border closure or tariffs of up to 25% on Mexican exports. I think those things which are designed to achieve a political objective are creating a lot of business uncertainty, which is having a rippling effect through Mexico.
So there's a lot of trade across that border, both ways, U.S. and Mexico.
Yeah.
How much of the effects that we're seeing are because of an actual curtailing of trade? How much of it is the uncertainty that you refer to? People say, we're still trading, but we're not sure if we can keep trading.
Yeah, so I was down in Mexico during the last threat of tariffs. I think it was a up to 25% tariff on all Mexican exports in the context of discussions around immigration. And I remember I was at dinner with a number of business executives who told me that they were literally lighting candles in prayer. So the idea that the idea of a 25% tariff is really, or closing the border themselves, is really quite destructive. I think you have to kind of understand the region to get a full sense of the impact. So the border, right? The border runs across 4 U.S. states, right? 2 U.S. states, which are the largest economies in the United States, 1 U.S. state, which is one of the largest economies in the world, California. You also have 6 Mexican states, one of which is the largest economy in Mexico as well, Nuevo León. And in that region, you have 14 million people. And it's the busiest, most frequently crossed border in the world. So you have to put this in the context of $1.7 billion of product that cross that border every day. 20,000 trucks, more than 200,000 cars, more than 500,000 pedestrians on any given day are crossing that border. And when you look in that $1.7 billion worth of goods, what do you find? You find the things that Americans consume on their table. Mexican produce keeps us going during the winter. You find the auto parts that sustain the U.S. auto industry. You find the electronic supplies, which are going to be so popular and sold on this Black Friday that's coming up. So I think it really is a very deeply integrated region and zone.
We're talking with Mike McGuinness of Jones Day. This is all about trade back and forth. You specialize in investment, mergers and acquisitions across the border. What has happened there? Has that dried up because people are saying we're just not sure what the rules are going to be?
Right. So the traditional wisdom in the M&A world is that M&A thrives on certainty. Certainty from a valuation point of view in the market, certainty from a political point of view and a regulatory point of view. And right now what we're seeing is a large amount of uncertainty in Mexico. If you put in context the sort of unfriendly attitude from the north that the Mexican businesses are experiencing, then you put that in the context of a new presidential administration, which sometimes has anti-business rhetoric. You'll see Mexican executives being sandwiched between northern and southern pressure, which is creating a lot of uncertainty in their world, and it's having a real palpable effect on the M&A market. So just to give you a granular number, in the first half of 2019, there were 78 M&A deals for a value of $5 billion. Contrast that to last year, that's a 35% dip. Contrast it to 2 years ago, it's a 50% dip.
And is that ingoing or outgoing from the United States point of view? Is it more U.S. companies investing in Mexican companies or the reverse?
It's actually, it's more U.S. going in, and in fact, the cross-border M&A statistics are quite dismal in terms of going out from Mexico to the United States. I think we had something like 50 transactions in the run-up to the last 2 years, and just 2 transactions in the first half of 2019 from Mexico to the United States.
We're talking with Mike McGuinness of Jones Day. You mentioned AMLO, the new president, and he has said some things that some of the business community has been nervous about, I think it's fair to say. You also have Pemex, a major driver of the Mexican economy with some difficulties in the oil production area as well as the price of oil. How can you sort out, if you can, what's going on with the uncertainty about the border and effects on the Mexican economy and the U.S. economy along the border from the new regime and Pemex?
Well, I definitely think I think they're in a cycle to begin with. I think that there's uncertainty that's driving a slowdown in the business. I think that the Mexican businesses have been confronted by these tariffs and have had to look at different opportunities in different markets to where they're going to trade in the event that there actually is a large tariff put on the border. I think all that combination of things and the business cycle has brought Mexico into recession.
So Mike, is this entirely separate from USMCA and NAFTA and the uncertainty about that? Because we also have that, particularly with the auto industry, for example. I guess that would bring some certainty exactly into the rules. But what you're talking about, just the border security issues by themselves?
No, I think when we think about what's happening at the U.S.-Mexico border, when we think about trade across that border, I think we really need to think about it in the context of the U.S. economy as well. And when I think about it in the context of the U.S. economy, I think about it through the prism of the U.S. auto industry and the U.S. electronics industry. And just to give you kind of a sense of that, if you look at how the U.S. auto industry works, it operates on lean manufacturing. Principles use just-in-time delivery of components and spare parts, so they depend on things that cross the border from Canada and from Mexico. Put in the context of that 16% of the auto parts that are used in the U.S. auto industry come from Mexico. And then think about a 25% tariff or the closure of the border and the ripple effect that will have
We're talking
on those businesses.
Mike McGuinness of Jones Day here. A final question. We hear a lot about the wall. It's all about the wall, dispute about the wall. The fact is, an awful lot of the trade doesn't go around a wall. It goes through the regular border crossings, right? From a point of view of certainty, would we be better off with just saying, okay, go ahead and build the wall and then get back to regular trade negotiations? Yeah,
no, I mean, I think the trade passes through, obviously it arrives on trucks and cars, and it passes through sort of the typical international lane. It's not part of things that are passing over or under or around the wall. So yes, I agree. I think fostering an economic trade environment is the most important thing in terms of building certainty, and then that certainty will drive economic results both in Mexico and the United States.